Here he comes in. It's Erick Erickson.
Good morning.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing all right.
Running around like a chicken with my head cut off?
Yeah, it's like you're hosting a gathering or something here.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see if people show up.
Well, hey, thank you for having us out. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. It's awesome to finally meet in person, too.
Yeah, exactly. We've talked to each other over the phone.
Yes.
And over Twitter and Instagram, and now finally in person.
And I get jealous of your cigar selections.
Well, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. And then, we both like whiskey.
Yes.
Yeah. Last night, by the way, I don't know if you've been to Friedman's Barbecue here yet.
Yes, I have.
Okay. So you know about the whiskey selection.
Yes.
It's impressive.
Yeah, and I'm not going to tell anybody that I'm going there tonight.
Hey, tell folks a little bit. I know you've got to get going, but tell folks what we're doing here this weekend.
So I've had a number of people push me for a while about doing a conference where instead of people coming and doing campaign speeches, actually sit on the stage and have a conversation about ideas and public policy. And particularly in an age where you got a lot of conservatives who they very much want to support the president, but at the same time, they're not big fans of tariffs, or they're not big fans of Republican leaders having $1 trillion deficit, let alone debt. Mm-hmm. So how do conservatives balance support for a party while maintaining their ideological principles and not caving into the pressure of just team sport?
Well, and it almost seems as though when you bring this up, whether it's on a radio show, whether it's on social media, you're attacked as not supporting the president, when all you're doing is, no, we want to get more conservative policies influencing the White House and also all of Congress.
Right. Yeah, I mean, look, it's not the president who passed legislation that gives us $1 trillion deficit.
Right.
He may be okay with the legislation, but it was the Republicans in Congress who attacked that for a decade, who passed that legislation. How do we hold our own side accountable? And you get this thing with Republican leaders where they say, if you don't support us, the Democrats are going to win. Well, the Democrats are giving us $1 trillion deficits, and now you're giving us $1 trillion deficits. So who do we actually support who's not going to give us $1 trillion deficit? That stuff matters. And it's time to have these conversations. And we're not always going to agree on the same things. But can we also maintain the fact that we're friends and on the same side, even if we have occasional disagreements? And I wanted to do that. I'm kind of tired of the massive conferences where it's $1,000 to show up, and it's anybody can get on stage who can write a check. We kept the cost at $99 for this, and we only invited sponsors we wanted to talk to. We invited Google and Facebook because we want to talk to them about conservative concerns with their platforms. We invited Greg Abbott. He's the governor of Texas. He's up for re-election. We invited Ajit Pai because conservatives are making big gains. I want him to confront all of the people he's killed because of net neutrality who will be sitting in the room listening to him.
Yeah, the death toll is huge right now.
Huge.
Yeah.
Between the tax cuts and that, I'm surprised there were any liberals left in Austin.
That's right. We are still able to call it Austin for right now.
For now, yes.
Confirmed. Okay.
Yes.
The Google and Facebook conference, those are going to be fascinating, I think, because it's in the news for, about censorship and everything else. I think that's going to be a huge conversation.
I really want to ask Google, I've told them the question is coming, if your motto is don't be evil, how do you go into China and run a web search that censors results? Why do you do that? What's your public policy rationale? Because in the past they started and they pulled out. So why do it? And I'm interested to hear what they have to say. What's the rationale behind it? I don't think these companies are inherently bad companies, and I really don't think they're out to get conservatives. Maybe Twitter is. I don't think the others are. But there definitely are conservative concerns. How do they balance hearing conservatives and not be in a bubble when most of their senior leadership is of the left? How do they make sure they're not stepping on the right?
Yeah, absolutely. Erick Erickson, the Resurgent gathering here in Austin. Thank you again for having us out.
Thank you.
All right, stop on by later if you can, okay?
Sure.
All right, that's Erick Erickson, Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, KFYO. As we broadcast from the Resurgent gathering, my next guest, I keep on saying here in studio, I guess here in the media room, is Congressman Jody Hice of Georgia, the 10th Congressional District, I believe. Correct, sir?
Right, Chad. Great to be here with you. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for being here, and glad to meet you. Tell folks a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I am from the 10th District of Georgia, which is on the east side of Metro Atlanta. We've got about 25 counties involved in that, including Athens, where the University of Georgia is, down to the Macon area, and from the eastern part of Metro Atlanta all the way over to South Carolina. But prior to being in Congress, I was a pastor for about 25 years and a conservative radio talk show host as well for about 12 years.
That's great. And so What are some of the big issues in your area, that constituents are coming to you about, and, what are some of their main concerns?
Well, it's pretty much, I don't know that our district is any different from the rest of the country. We want national security. We want to cut spending. People want a secure border. I mean, these types of things that we hear over and over and over in the news are the items that are a big concern in the 10th District of Georgia as well. Getting rid of Obamacare, that remains high on the list. And so these are the things, frankly, that so many Republicans ran on to deal with. And unfortunately, when they get elected, oftentimes they don't stand up for those principles. So that's where the battle is, but those are the type of things that run heavy in the 10th District.
Now, back at the KFYO home location in Lubbock, West Texas, it's hard to describe someone as too conservative, but Erick Erickson was saying that you've been challenged a few times for being too conservative for Georgia. Obviously, you've stopped your opponents from winning that argument. What does that mean, too conservative? How do they say you're too conservative?
Well, you always hear this rhetoric that you've got to be centrist, middle of the road to get anything done. And my question is, how is that working out for us? You cannot be status quo in an era such as we're living these days. We're really watching the demise of our country right under our nose. We're in the fight of our life. This is no time to be floating downstream like a dead fish. And I am conservative. I'm unashamed of it. I'm a constitutional Christian conservative and outspoken about that. And the people of the 10th District have responded exceedingly well with that. And we stand for those principles, and we're going to continue to do so.
I think one of the goals of this conference is to get out. How do we keep spreading that? How do we keep spreading conservatism throughout Congress, throughout even state government, local government, but really on this conference, federal government. So how do we continue to spread conservatism into policy throughout Congress and even up continued through the White House?
Well, obviously it all begins at the grassroots level, electing true conservatives, not people who just talk about it. And so that's where all of us, we the people, have an enormous role. And fortunately, with every election cycle that we're watching these days, more and more true conservatives are actually being elected. Those that are in trouble are the ones that are more moderate and that type of thing. But once elected, there's a number of things that have to happen, and the first is to actually stand for what you ran on. And we all see that's the president is getting, he's doing that, and the American people are rallying around it. And they do the same with other elected officials as well. But, we've got to have ground up, bottom up type leadership. Right now we have an enormous void in leadership. It's reactionary rather than offensive. And you cannot accomplish what you said you would do if you're always reacting. You've got to have a vision to move forward, and that's offense. But I'm a part of the Freedom Caucus, as you well know, a board member of the Freedom Caucus. We are seeing our numbers grow with every election. And, we have tremendous power because we stick together and we actually stand for what we said we'd stand for, even when it means going against our own party line.
How do Republicans keep the House in 2018?
Well, that's going to be quite a challenge. Historically, keeping the House in the party of the president in power is always a challenge historically. But we've just got to go out and take our message. At this point, the message is pretty clear. You have the Republican Party and you have the Democrat Socialist Party is really what we're dealing with these days. And people need to wake up to the reality that is what we're facing. Yeah. A Democrat Party that is running so far to the left, it is anything but America as you and I have always known it, and what so many of our men and women in uniform have fought to defend. So we've got to take our message out front and be bold with it, and then be willing to live when we get to D.C. on it, be willing to die for it as well.
I don't know if you want to endorse anyone for the next speaker if Republicans hold on to the House.
I'll be happy to. Jim Jordan is my guy.
There you go. I was going to, some want to tiptoe away.
No, listen, I'm not tiptoeing at all with that. Jim Jordan is the guy we need, and, he's an incredible leader and an authentic, true, solid, to the core conservative. And that's an enormous vacuum that we've had for a long, long time. It's true leadership.
Not asking you to say anything bad about the current speaker, but how would they be different?
Well, I mean, just kind of as our conversation here has been going along, we all ran on certain things, and we in the Freedom Caucus, I think it's interesting. You can really go down to the Republican platform. And the Freedom Caucus is one standing for the platform that our whole party agreed to represent. Unfortunately, current leadership tends to go to the left when there is a question rather than run to the right. And so that gets old. We cannot continue floating downstream, as I said earlier, like a dead fish. We've got to swim upstream. We've got to have solid leadership to help us as a party to do that, and Jim Jordan is that kind of person.
Congressman Jody Hice of Georgia, appreciate your time today. I know everyone's going to enjoy your speech when you give it, and thank you for coming on the show.
Honor to be here, Chad. Thanks for having me.
Chad Hasty Show, live from the Resurgent gathering, welcomed by Representative Dustin Burrows here in Austin, Texas. This is the Chad Hasty Show, and joining me here at the Resurgent gathering is State Chairman for the Republican Party, James Dickey. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, great to see you in person. Again, in person. I know you've been in studio once or twice there in Lubbock, and glad to see you here. What do you think about the Resurgent gathering, their first conference, and picking Austin, Texas for it?
It is. I think it's great that they picked Austin. They've got an amazing lineup of speakers. The governor this morning, of course, was fantastic, and they've got some interesting panels, and it's nice. Erick Erickson, of course, was involved with Red State and the Red State gatherings.
Right.
I had attended one of those in Dallas several years ago, and it was fantastic then, and I had no doubt that this would be great as well.
And I think it really is a testament to the Republican Party here in Texas, and also, just conservatism in Texas, and why they picked Austin and really Texas to be the first host.
I think you're right. I mean, there are no question a lot of real conservative leaders as Republican elected office holders in Texas. And so coming here gave them an amazing pool of talent from which to draw for their first convention. And it's fantastic.
Yeah. Speaking of conventions, you're done with yours. How did the Republican convention go here in the state of Texas?
It was amazing. We had thousands of people there from all over the state, as we do. It is the biggest political convention in the country in terms of delegates and alternates. And the budget for the convention was over $1.5 million, and we covered that budget, which was, that in itself is amazing.
Yeah.
We got a bunch of great sponsors. The exhibit hall was fantastic. The sponsors all gave us really positive marks. The delegates all gave us positive marks on just a really well-run convention that had a lot of chance for people to really debate things. Now, there were a lot of things I wish had gone slightly differently, and certainly there are a lot of things we've taken notes on. But this year was the first time that all of the delegates and alternates could review the draft platform and the draft rules online the minute they were done. And that alone was a big thing. We're certainly going to do more things to, pass out ballots earlier and the like. But the reality is all the delegates had a day and a half to be able to review all of that before they voted on it, and before they debated it. And we had an open, lively debate about them. We made some changes, and we ended up with a really great product. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're visiting with James Dickey here on the Chad Hasty Show at the Resurgent gathering in Austin, Texas. What do you think? Because most people obviously don't go to a party convention. Most voters don't go to the party convention. There are a lot of ideas that are thrown out. Do you think that would surprise people? That how many different ideas and how many different, if you want to call them factions, but how many groups are within the Republican Party?
Oh, absolutely. It is, sadly, in a lot of other states, it's more the norm that all of that kind of stuff gets done in back rooms and among those who are invited only kind of thing. The Texas Republican Party in particular is uniquely grassroots. We welcome anyone from the floor to make an amendment to any element of the platform or the rules, and the body has a chance to take it up and debate it and vote on it. And also every single delegate and alternate has a right to testify in front of the committees that happen for days, and it's all done online and transparent, and it's live streamed. I mean, it is the most open, welcoming, grassroots up level process that I've ever seen.
Yeah. Let's talk about elections that are going on. We're going into the midterms. How does the state party get involved? What does the state party do?
Oh, we are doing so much. First of all, we've had field staff in place for over a year now. And that field staff, we've already recruited and trained over 1,200 volunteers. We have knocked on tens of thousands of doors statewide. We have areas that we are particularly focused in where we're concerned about those races. But we are training and empowering and amplifying the efforts of our grassroots all over the state, and we're getting the most amazing, most up-to-date data out to all of our campaigns. We're encouraging coordinated efforts. Where necessary, we're doing joint judicial campaigns where we're working with groups of judges where they're able to pool their efforts, and within a bunch of legal restrictions, we're able to help make their efforts much more efficient and much more successful. We are in Dallas County. We've helped facilitate a door knocking effort that is going to do door knocking on 400,000 doors over the next couple of months. I mean, we are doing a level of ground up field work that just really hasn't been seen before. Do
you worry about, you bring up Dallas, obviously the blue colors getting a little bit deeper blue in Dallas. Do you worry about that, moving into the future? And how do you combat it?
Well, the best way I know of to combat it is to just consistently, personally, one-to-one, make the case that Texas is as successful as it is because for the last 15 years we've had total Republican leadership, and that the conservative principles that make Texas great, it's not a coincidence that we've had control of the House only for the last 15 years, and for the last 14 years, Texas was named the best place to do business, right?
Yeah.
It is not a coincidence. It's because of strong Republican leadership, and it's easy for people to forget that and get complacent and get off track from some shiny new object that is a distraction and forget the core message, which is if you like jobs and if you like unemployment being very, very low, and if you like a future that means prosperity for your kids and your neighbors and their kids, you need to keep going what has been working in Texas so well.
Yeah. Let's see, we got about a minute left. How can folks get more involved?
Absolutely. Reach out to your local county party. There should be a website for, blank Republican Party, for your county. Reach out to us, texasgop.org. We have, you can sign up to volunteer. You can sign up for our newsletters, our email. You can, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and we let people know things are going on. There are a lot of ways to get involved.
Very nice. State Chairman James Dickey, appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Usually we talk to him on Mondays. It's Matt Mackowiak.
Hey, Chad, how you doing?
What's going on?
Welcome to Austin, man. We got a view of the Capitol out the window here. We got 300 conservatives from all over the country who are here for the Resurgent gathering, and it's great to have you here and talk to you in person for the Chad Hasty Show.
I know. It's great to be here, and I'm glad we get to sit down and talk. Looks like you just had a pretty interesting conversation as well for your podcast.
I did, yeah. This, as you know, and your listeners know, because I have a chance to promote it every week on Mondays normally, but we have the Mac on Politics podcast that I produce with the Washington Times. We just talked to Congressman Warren Davidson, who succeeded John Boehner for his congressional seat in the 8th District in Ohio. Very impressive guy. I did not know too much about him before we taped the conversation. Army Ranger. He's on the Financial Services Committee. He had a lot to say about trade and agriculture and Dodd-Frank. So good conversation. That'll be available on wherever you get podcasts here in a couple hours.
Yeah, very nice. And, of course, the Resurgent Gathering, I think it's awesome that they picked the state of Texas to have the first Resurgent gathering.
Yeah, Erick's been a friend of mine for, 5 or 10 years, and having known him as long as I have, I can tell you that he loves Texas, truly. He loves Georgia, and I don't think he'll leave Georgia, and he's, I think, a native of Louisiana. Erick Erickson, the founder of the Resurgent and the host of this event. But I can tell you that of all the states, he loves Texas. He loves the ideals of Texas. He loves the energy. He loves the conservatives that are here, the passion. We have great elected officials with our Governor Greg Abbott, who he knows, and Senator Ted Cruz, who he knows and supported for Senate, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, so many others that he knows well. And so, of course, Chip Roy is a close friend of his who's running for Congress. So I think he loves the idea of Texas, and he felt like the first place he wanted to do it was in Texas. And so then it's a matter of just which city do you pick, where can you put the best event together, and so far it's been a real success.
Yeah, absolutely. What are either speakers or topics? What are you looking for? What do you think is going to be one of the more interesting, either topics or speakers that we're going to hear this week?
Yeah, I mean, it was great to have the governor open up the conference and have a conversation with Erick about what the state's doing, how he approaches issues, what he's working on, and what the future of the state looks like. So that in and of itself was valuable. I think the highlight probably will be Senator Ted Cruz on Saturday when he speaks here. He is a great speaker. He fires people up. He has an interesting perspective, and he's a solid conservative. And so I think people in Austin, particularly the people that are here at this conference, are interested to hear from him. But you're going to hear from other people too, like Warren Davidson, Jody Hice, a congressman from Georgia, Mark Walker from North Carolina, who leads the conservative Republican study committee in Congress. So there's some great voices here. I think, part of it is, where does conservatism end, and where does sort of Trumpism begin? There's obviously a lot of overlap between conservatism and Trumpism, but they're not the same thing. We have to be honest about that. There are a lot of people who are here that like a lot of what Trump is doing, myself included. I probably like 90% of what he's doing. But there are also a lot of people here that aren't comfortable with the use of tariffs, particularly broad-based tariffs.
Right.
And you've already had a couple people talk about that. And I think you'll have more people talk about that. So to some extent, Chad, there'll be an interesting debate on some of these issues. We'll see how people respond. The president remains very, very, very popular among Republicans and among conservatives, and he's had a lot of success in a year and a half. But that doesn't mean that everything he says and does is right just because he's the one that says it or does it, right? We have to evaluate these things independently of whether he likes them or not. We have to see whether they're good for the country, whether they meet our principles, whether they're truly conservative, and whether they support the Constitution and our reflect limited government, the principles that we have.
Well, I think it's also good. This is going to be truly a conservative conference, and conservative ideas and policies that are talked about. And those are policies that need to continue to be talked about in Washington, D.C., taken from here and going to Washington, D.C. And I think we're going to hear a little bit about that, too, how to get these policy ideas from just being talked about. Senator Cruz has been a driving force behind that, how to take what we're talking about here and actually get it done. Because that's harder to do in D.C.
That's exactly right. And I'm actually on a panel on that tomorrow talking about how to take ideas and put them into practice up on Capitol Hill. We have a panel of people who've worked on Capitol Hill tomorrow. We're going to talk about that in the afternoon. One of the interesting things about this is that conservatism and republicanism are not the same thing either. Right. Conservatism is about ideas. Republicanism is about a party. And as someone who chairs the local county party in Austin, I care a hell of a lot about the Republican Party, but I recognize there's a difference. And so one of the things that I often laugh about is former U.S. Senator Jim DeMint, Republican of South Carolina, often likes to say, and said when he was in the Senate, and then after he continues to say it, conservatives will always be the minority in Congress. And you hear that and you think, well, hang on a sec, Republicans have a majority. But that's not what he said. He says conservatives will always be the minority in Congress. And it's an important thing to understand because sometimes the biggest fight for conservatives is not with Democrats. It's with Republicans on things. Whether it's big, cronyism, big government stuff, immigration, trade, you name it. Could be Obamacare, a great example. Immigration. There are all kinds of issues where sometimes these fights are intense fights inside the Republican Party because there are cross pressures that members of Congress are dealing with. Yeah,
I had Congressman Jody Hice on earlier. And, he was pretty, he went out and said, yeah, absolutely, Jim Jordan for House Speaker. What do you think about Jim Jordan? If Republicans can hold on to the House.
I personally like Jim Jordan quite a bit. I know him a little bit. I've been around him a bit. He is a solid person and a solid conservative. I think his path to being Speaker is non-existent. Just candidly, I don't think he has a path to being Speaker. I think what he's really running for is a minority leader. He would probably be a very good minority leader because he's an old wrestler. He's an old wrestling coach, as all of us have learned quite a bit about recently. he's a bulldog and a fighter, and he's tremendously principled and has great integrity. And I think he'd be a very solid minority leader. Being speaker is a different type of job than being minority leader. And so I don't think he has a path to being speaker. I think what he's trying to do is ensure that whoever becomes speaker, conservatives have a bigger and better seat at the table than they have now.
Yeah.
And I think he's running for that reason. I think even he knows he doesn't have a path to being speaker. But if he can negotiate a better deal with McCarthy or Scalise or whoever ultimately becomes speaker, he thinks that'll be better for conservative policy outcomes. And I think that's why he's running. But I also think he's running because he thinks there's a chance Republicans may lose the House. And if that's true, he could become minority leader. There is a chance of that.
Yeah, very interesting. Matt, thanks for stopping by.
Pleasure. Great to see you in person.
Yeah,
Welcome again to Austin.
Thank you very much. Joining me right now, a guy who left the state of Texas, but is back right now, David Guenthner. Welcome back, man.
It's good to see you. Glad to be back in town for 48 hours and not much longer at this time of year.
Is it truly 48 hours? Because you got in at like 2 o'clock? Because
it's going to wind up being more like 53, I think.
Okay.
Because I had a flight delay last night to where we didn't land in Austin until about 2 in the morning, and then we're out on the first plane out Sunday. So it's going to be a very, very quick, exhausting trip. Trying to get as much time with my friends back here and as many tacos as I can before heading
delicious.
back up to the Mexican food wasteland that is Michigan.
Yeah. Now, of course, when you would join us, and on obviously on Pratt's show, Texas Public Policy Foundation. Now you're in Michigan.
Yes, I had the opportunity to go up and join the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, which is based in Midland, Michigan. It was the first of the really big national or state-based think tanks in the country. And when I started Texas Public Policy Foundation in 2007, they were the organization that everybody looked up to on everything, that we learned how to do our research based on their practices. We identified issues based on how they developed their metrics. A lot of the management and operations of building an organization and building a team were things that we learned from them. And over the course of the last 11 and a half years, really developed a deep admiration for the organization and its people. But they've never had a government affairs presence before. And so toward the end of last year, they finally got the green light to go in that direction, and we started having some conversations, and ultimately a few months ago they asked me to come up and to build the government affairs capacity that I had done at Texas Public Policy Foundation for them. It's an exciting time to be up there because Michigan, it's a perception it's a blue state, but you have a Republican governor. President Trump carried the state for the first time in a few elections. You have Republican majorities in the House and the state Senate, but you also have a very aggressive term limit regime up there, such that of the 38 members of the Michigan Senate, only 11 are running for re-election. 26 are ineligible, and one of them is running for his great-uncle, John Conyers' open congressional seat. So you've got a lot of House members who are also termed out who are running for those Senate seats, and you're looking at probably 75% turnover in the state Senate and closer to 40 to 50% in the state House.
Is that a good thing?
For someone who's trying to get acclimated into the state, and you have a lot of new people who don't necessarily know, how things have been, it's a great way to get to meet a lot of people early, to establish credibility, to establish relationships. So it's an exciting opportunity. It's a little nerve-wracking because you wind up investing time in people that you don't know are going to be there.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of those things that every so often in your career you need to stretch out and take on some new challenges. I think the idea of taking the program and the perspective and the strategy and tactics that worked so well here in Texas and transplanting them to a more competitive political environment, that's something that's really, really invigorating. And I think it's got a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point about Michigan. I think you're right. When people think Michigan, they think blue state, they think Democrat state.
Left for dead for 3 decades.
Yeah, but it's maybe call it purple. Is it a purple state?
It is one that swings on a pendulum. It's definitely when you have candidates who can speak to the working class, your traditional blue collar workers, and who is focused on economic growth. I think that's a good opportunity for Republicans in that state and conservatives. It's a challenge because you've had with it being formerly such a huge industrial state, and still is to some extent, you have a huge amount of union influence up there.
Yeah.
And so Michigan passed right to work about 6 years ago. There are some other labor reforms that have been working their way through the pipeline, trying to let workers have more influence over how they spend their money, and they're voluntary associations instead of compelled, and that the grip of the unions is not nearly as strong as it used to be, which is helping to allow businesses to look and see that the state's a better place to grow and expand. And you're seeing some signs of life up there, and it's really exciting to look and see what may be possible over the next 5 years.
What can you take from your time at Texas Public Policy Foundation and what the state of Texas has done, and apply that in Michigan?
I think what you look at is people look at Texas as being a one-party state, that really for practical purposes it's a three-party state, in that the dynamic you have is you've got about a third of the legislature, particularly the House, are Democrats. You've got a third who are your more what I will describe as establishment / country club / transactional Republicans, and then you've got a third who are your movement conservatives like you and me. And you've got to figure out ways to have good relationships and mutual respect and open lines of communication among all three, because the allegiances between those three factions shifts on issue to issue. And so having the perspective to be able to know, okay, here's a time when I'm going to need 10 Democrat votes to be able to get something good done, and I look and I see potential common ground, or that we've already gone through our respective processes and that we wound up in the same spot, albeit for fundamentally different reasons. How do you manage the working relationship? How do you work together, or at least are pulling on the same rope? Or it may be even a case where you work on separate paths, but you have the back channel of communication to where okay, here are the 10 members who I talk to, here are the 10 who you talk to, and working things that way. I think that's definitely going to help in a state where I'm coming in from outside, I'm new, and trying to figure out how to be able to get the votes on a number of these conservative priorities.
Are there some good, strong conservatives in Michigan?
Yeah, there are some great conservatives in Michigan.
Yep.
It's just one of those situations where I think the districts, if you look at the way they're drawn, there are a lot more competitive districts up there. And if you have a blue wave, that you could wind up having a situation where Republicans have a 16-seat majority in the House right now, that there is a lot of concern that a blue wave could wind up flipping that chamber.
Yeah.
The governor's race up there is going to be challenging, and I mean it's a different environment. One of the other things that they have up there is they've got voter-initiated legislation, which is kind of an initiative process where you have the ability for groups or citizens to do petition drives to get the legislature to pass legislation. And if the petition has enough signatures and it's validated, the legislature has 40 days to produce or to pass the legislation. Otherwise, it goes on the next general election ballot. And so one of the big issues right now is there's a paid sick leave initiative that just went on the ballot, just got approved a couple of days ago, that's going to be challenging because you're going to wind up having Republicans being in a position where they're going to have to vote for it
Right.
now. Otherwise, if it goes to the voters and gets approved, the burden to change it later is even higher than constitutional amendment.
Yeah. David Guenthner, always good to see you.
All right, good to see you.
Best of luck in Michigan.
Thanks.